It was one of those southern evenings where the heat hadn't let go, even with the sun slipping behind the trees, the kind of quiet that should feel peaceful, but didn't. Isaiah was just trying to get home, nothing more. His shift had run long. Again, third night in a row, 12 hours on his feet, to back-to-back code blues. And he hadn't even had time to eat. He still had his scrubs on, badge clipped to his collar, chest tight from exhaustion, feet sore from walking hallways that smelled like antiseptic and slow death. He took the back road, less traffic, fewer lights, and then, red and blue lit up his rearview mirror. He sighed. Not the kind that means you're mad, the kind that means you already know. He hit the signal, pulled over slow, just like they always tell you to. Dome light on, hands on the wheel, no sudden moves, no reaching, no questions, no pride. He was only 2 blocks from his own street. 2 blocks. You learn to live with this kind of thing when you're black in a place that hasn't changed much. Since the 60s, you learn to pretend it doesn't bother you, like it's normal. Like being seen as a threat is just part of the air you breathe. But tonight, something felt different. The officer didn't approach right away, sat there in his car for a minute. Then another set of headlights appeared in the mirror. Back up, quiet, no sirens. Isaiah glanced once, slow, toward the side mirror, white face, buzz cut, arm resting on the door like he had all the time in the world. The first officer stepped out finally, hand on the holster already, no flashlight, just that look, license and registration. No greeting, no explanation. Isaiah kept his voice calm, tired but calm. Yes, sir. I'm reaching with my right hand. My license is in my wallet. The officer didn't nod, just stared. You in a hurry to get somewhere? Isaiah swallowed. Just got off work. I'm heading home. The second officer had come up behind now, standing by the back of the car. No words, just watching. You always take this road. Isaiah hesitated. Was that a trap? Sometimes. He said, it's the quickest way to. Got anything in the car I should know about? That was it. That was the shift. The moment. It stopped being about a traffic stop and turned into something else. Isaiah shook his head. No, sir. He could feel his heartbeat in his teeth, hands still on the wheel, still in scrubs, still black. The first officer leaned in, shining his flashlight across Isaiah's face like he was searching for something buried under his skin. You look nervous. I'm tired, Isaiah answered, and yeah, a little nervous. That's normal, right? The officer didn't laugh, didn't even blink. And then came the line he'd heard too many times on the news, in stories that always ended badly. Step out of the vehicle. Right there, Isaiah knew. He hadn't done anything. But this wasn't about doing. This was about being. Being the wrong skin tone, in the wrong car, on the wrong street, at the wrong hour. Before I go any further, if you're still here, listening, my name is Mark Joie, and this is Injustice Browning. We tell the stories that don't make the headlines. That sit heavy in the chest and force us to look closer. If you're feeling something already, subscribe, comment below. I need to know if you're seeing what I see, because this right here is where it begins. A good man, doing nothing wrong. But that's never been enough to keep us safe. And Isaiah? He didn't know it yet, but tonight would change everything. It happened fast. That's what Isaiah kept saying, over and over. 1 minute, his hands were still on the wheel. The next, the door swung open. Cold hands yanked him out like trash. He didn't resist, didn't raise his voice, didn't move too quickly, didn't even ask why, because he already knew asking would make it worse. The officer shouted something. Isaiah's knees hit gravel, a foot jammed into his back. He tried to tell them again that he had just gotten off work, that he had nothing in his pockets, that they could check, but words don't mean much when you're already the suspect. Stop resisting. That's what they always say, whether you move or not, whether you cry out or stay silent. The line never changes. It's the script. 1 blow to the ribs, 2 to the shoulder. His chin cracked against the pavement, and still, they kept yelling. The backup officer joined in, shouting, cursing. One of them claimed Isaiah had reached under the seat. Isaiah hadn't moved, but in that moment, it didn't matter. They cuffed him so tight. His hands went numb, slammed him against the hood, searched the car, found nothing, but still wrote the report like they dodged a bullet. Said he lunged, said he tried to run, said he made them fear for their safety. Fear? Isaiah was the one who couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. could barely think through the pounding in his head. They didn't take him to the hospital. They took him straight to county lockup, still in scrubs, blood drying on his temple. No call, no lawyer, no rights explained, just a cell, cold, gray, and humming with the kind of quiet that breaks something inside you. His mother didn't find out until 10 a.m. the next morning. A nurse at the hospital, one who had worked beside Isaiah for the past 2 years, called her in tears, said she heard what happened, that Isaiah never showed up for his shift, that someone had seen his name on the county intake list. Denise didn't believe it at first, thought it had to be a mistake. Her son didn't do drugs, didn't hang with trouble. He went from work to home to church. That was it. She drove straight to the station. They made her wait 2 hours, wouldn't let her see him, gave her a form with charges that made no sense: resisting arrest, suspicious behavior, failure to comply, no mention of drugs, no mention of weapons, no reason for the stop. She asked to speak to the arresting officer. They said he was off duty. She asked again, louder this time. Finally, a man in uniform came out. Cold eyes, firm jaw. Didn't look her in the face. Just repeated what the report said, like he was reading from memory. He reached under his seat. "Ma'am, we had to act fast. Our officers followed protocol." Denise stared at him. "My son's a nurse," she said, voice shaking. "He saves lives. You beat him and locked him up like a dog." The officer didn't flinch, didn't care. He was already gone, even while standing there. And Isaiah, he sat in the holding cell, silent, bruised, humiliated. When Denise finally saw him, she couldn't breathe. One side of his face was swollen, his lips split, his hands still trembling, but his eyes were empty. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just leaned his head against her shoulder like he was 5 years old again. That night, Denise sat at her kitchen table, staring at the paperwork. Her hands shook with rage. The whispers had already started in town. Some folks said he must have done something. That police don't just beat you for no reason. That maybe he mouthed off. Maybe he ran. Maybe he reached. Maybe he's not as good as she says he is. But the dashcam footage, what little the lawyers would eventually get, told the truth. No reaching. No threats. No weapon. Just a black man sitting still, and a system that can't tell the difference between presence and danger. And the saddest part, nobody was surprised. They'd seen it before. They just learned to look away, because silence protects the lie, and truth doesn't always speak loud enough to be heard. But Denise, she wasn't about to stay quiet. Denise sat alone in the attic, knees pulled close, the heat pressing in around her like breath from something ancient. Dust floated in the sunbeams cutting through the cracked wood. The air smelled like time. It had been 3 days since she got Isaiah home. 3 days of barely sleeping, of replaying every second of what the officer said, what Isaiah didn't say, what the neighbors whispered. She came up here because she couldn't breathe downstairs, couldn't stand the silence of the house. She pulled the first box toward her, old cardboard, marked in her father's writing, 1965. Keep inside. Folded newspapers, faded and brittle. One headline read, "State Troopers clash with Marchers in Selma." She knew the story, but it hit different now. Tucked between the pages was a letter, creased, fragile. It was from her grandfather. "We crossed the bridge today. They hit us, baby, with batons, with tear gas, with fists. But we didn't move. I held hands with a stranger and told God if I didn't come home to take care of you and your mama." Denise let the letter rest in her lap. Her chest tightened. That letter had always felt like a relic. Now it felt like a mirror. Another box. This one marked Uncle Joe. She hesitated. She hadn't opened it in years. She remembered the story. Whispers. At the kitchen table when she was little. How Uncle Joe was only 19. Walked into town with a group of friends. Smiled along at a white girl coming out of a hardware store. She smiled back. That night, they dragged him out of his bed. The official story said it was suicide. Said he confessed in a note, but the note was typed, and Joe couldn't even read. The family buried him in silence, because they had to. Isaiah had asked her once, when he was about 10, "Mama, why don't we ever talk about Uncle Joe?" She didn't know how to explain it back then. Now she did. Fear keeps the past quiet, but silence doesn't heal wounds. It hides them, and they never stop bleeding. She reached for one more box. Her father's war letters. Vietnam. His handwriting was rough, slanted. This country will send me halfway around the world to shoot at people I don't know, but won't protect me from the man who called me a monkey outside the courthouse. They want our blood, but not our voices. He had come back from the war, changed, spoke less, smoked more, but he told Denise one thing when she was old enough to understand. Our silence doesn't keep us safe. It just keeps them comfortable. Those words echoed now. Louder than anything, she thought about Isaiah's face when he finally came home. How quiet he was. How he wouldn't look her in the eyes. She knew. That look, she'd seen it on her father, her grandfather, on pictures of men beaten for standing up to straight, for speaking to clear. Isaiah was in the same cycle now, same town, same rules, different uniform, but the system, still the same. She closed the box slowly, pressing her hand against the lid like she was sealing something back into the earth. No, not this time. She stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans, her legs stiff from sitting too long, her heart heavier, but her spine straighter. They could beat a man, lie on paper, bury stories, but they couldn't erase memory, and they sure as hell couldn't erase her voice. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth, and truth had roots in her blood, in letters, in coffins, in tears wiped away behind closed doors. Denise had taught history for 20 years. She could recite dates, cases, movements, but nothing in those textbooks could explain what it felt like to see your child carry the same scars your uncle died with. This was no accident. This was a pattern, a method, a blueprint, and Isaiah. He wasn't just her son. He was now part of the story, the ongoing fight. She walked back down the attic stairs slower than she went up, but different. This time, she wasn't just a mother. She was a witness, a vessel, a storm that had been building for generations, and Denise had made a decision. She would not let this be buried. Not in this town, not in this century, and not in her family. Denise didn't know much about lawyers, but she knew enough to know who not to trust. So she made a few calls, talked to an old friend in Atlanta, and 3 days later, a car pulled up in front of her house, license plate from Fulton County. Talia Johnson stepped out, 32, braids pulled back, briefcase in one hand, fire in her eyes. She didn't smile when they shook hands. She just said, "Tell me everything." So Denise did. Talia listened without interrupting. Without blinking, she read the police report, quietly, calmly, then looked up and said, "They're lying." Denise nodded. Talia tapped the edge of the folder. "We'll hit them with public records requests, body cam footage, dispatch logs, internal memos, all of it. But this town wasn't built for justice. It was built for appearances." They went to the courthouse the next morning. Cold stares, long waits. Clerks couldn't locate files that should have been easy to find. The city attorney refused to meet in person. The district judge said his schedule was full. Talia knew what that meant. They were circling the wagons, closing ranks. The police union issued a statement the next day. "Our officers followed protocol in a high-risk encounter. We stand by their actions." High risk. Isaiah had a stethoscope in his glove box. That was the only thing under his seat. They filed motions, demanded footage. Days turned into weeks. One tape was missing. Another was corrupted. Even the dashcam video they had was clipped, choppy, edited like someone had something to hide. And the town paper, silent. Denise called the editor herself, told him what happened, offered photos, medical records, statements. He sighed, said, "We don't want to rile people up. There's already tension in the community. Double quotes tension. As if telling the truth causes the fire. Instead of revealing the smoke. Denise stood up at the next city council meeting. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "My son is not a thug. He's not a threat. He is a nurse who saves lives while you're asleep." She looked each one of them in the eye. "Tell me why he came home with his face bruised, his ribs cracked, and not a single charge that holds water." They nodded politely, wrote nothing down, called her ma'am and thanked her for speaking, then moved to the next agenda item like she hadn't even opened her soul in front of them. She went home that night with her throat raw and her heart breaking. Felt like she was shouting into a canyon, but then something changed. It started at the hospital. One nurse stopped her in the hallway, eyes darting. "Same thing happened to my nephew last year. They stopped him walking home, said he matched the description, beat him bad, never even charged him." Another woman, a tech who always kept to herself, whispered, "They stopped me too. Right outside my own house. Made me get out. Hands on the hood. My kid saw everything, and then Mr. Henry spoke up. He was old, real old, walked with a cane and cleaned floors like they were holy ground. Nobody ever paid him much attention. He walked up to Denise while she was standing outside one evening, watching the sky. Man, he said, voice low, I've been working in that hospital longer than your boy been alive, and I seen what they do. She looked at him. He leaned on his cane. They been doing this since forever, since my brother, since my cousin. It don't stop. He paused. But they only listen when a mother cries on TV. That sentence stuck to her bones. They only listen when a mother cries on TV. Not in council meetings, not in court filings, not in phone calls or quiet rooms. They needed to feel it, to see it. Denise went back inside, pulled out her laptop, and opened the folder labeled Isaiah. Pictures of his injuries, medical reports, the scrub top they cut off of him, blood on the collar. She opened her phone, hit record. Her voice cracked on the first sentence, but she didn't stop. She told the story from the beginning. How her son was pulled over for nothing, beaten for nothing, jailed for nothing. She held up the photos, spoke Isaiah's name like a prayer and a warning. Then she uploaded it, closed the laptop. And waited. The video reached 1,000 views in the first hour. 10,000 by sunset. Denise didn't know what going viral felt like before. She figured it might feel like relief, like justice finally stretching its limbs, but that's not what it felt like. It felt like standing naked in the middle of a battlefield. Her face was everywhere. Her voice, cracking and raw, echoed in timelines and inboxes. The photos of Isaiah's battered skin were reposted over and over, his name now a hashtag. By morning, she had messages from people in 4 different states, women who lost sons, men who'd been stopped and cuffed for walking in their own neighborhoods. People saying thank you, people saying I see you, and then came the other messages. The threats, the ones that didn't use names, just words, like liar, witch, you people. One morning, she opened her mailbox and found an envelope, no return address, just a printed Bible verse inside. Wives, submit to your husbands. Nothing else. Another day, she came outside to find a brick through her car window. No note this time, just shattered glass across the front seat where Isaiah used to sit. Talia told her, this is what happens when truth gets too close. Denise didn't cry, didn't run. She just bought a new window, swept the glass off her driveway, and kept talking. And then the voices started rising, one by one. Her former students began reaching out, grown now, some with kids of their own. One girl said, you were the only teacher who ever said our stories mattered. Now you're living one. The church down the road organized a rally. They held candles in the parking lot, sang old spirituals off-key, but strong. Some folks brought signs, others just brought silence and open eyes. And then, something unexpected. Her neighbor, Mr. Whitaker, retired, lived the doors down for 20 years, always polite, always distant. His son was a cop. Everyone knew that. He showed up on her porch one evening, holding a flash drive. I don't want no trouble, he said quietly, but I checked my Ring camera from that night. Denise stared at him. He looked tired, worried, like a man choosing between blood and truth. It's grainy, he said, but it's clear enough. She opened the file that night, watched it twice. There was the officer, Isaiah already cuffed, sitting on the curb, head down, and the officer walking back to the car, reaching under the seat, placing something, looking around, walking away. That was it. Not dramatic, not loud, but undeniable. Because truth always leaves a trace. It didn't happen fast. Justice never does. But it came. 7 months after the night Isaiah was dragged from his car, the indictment dropped. The officer now suspended, no badge, no gun, was charged with falsifying a report, planting evidence, and using excessive force. The department issued a carefully worded statement, said they were deeply sorry, said this wasn't who they were, blamed it on a failure of protocol and individual misconduct. Not a word about Isaiah's face, his ribs, his nights locked in a cell for a lie, but the court wiped his record clean. The case dismissed, the charges dissolved like they'd never existed. Still, Denise knew better. Scars don't show up in paperwork. You have to live with them to understand. Isaiah smiled less now, laughed only when he forgot he wasn't supposed to. He still worked at the hospital, but part-time. Too many days. He couldn't be around the sound of police radios or the smell of bleach. He had panic attacks sometimes, couldn't drive at night, flinched when headlights came up too fast behind him. Healing, it turns out, doesn't wear a watch, doesn't come with closure. It just shows up in pieces. And sometimes, not at all. Denise stopped teaching that summer. She packed up her classroom, turned in her keys, and walked out without a goodbye. She didn't stop educating though. She just changed the room. Churches, school gyms, community halls, places that never had cameras but always had people ready to listen. She spoke about systems, about silence, about sons. She told them what fear sounds like in a 911 call that never gets made, what courage looks like in a nurse's uniform, covered in blood he didn't ask for. Isaiah came with her sometimes, sat in the back, spoke when he could. Other times, he stayed home, and that was okay, because healing isn't a performance. Sometimes it's a quiet walk in the woods. Sometimes it's not answering your phone for a few days. Sometimes it's just breathing and knowing that's enough. People began to listen, really listen. One girl, 12 years old, came up to Denise after the speech and said, "I want to be loud like you." Denise smiled, not big, just enough, because being loud, it comes with a cost. They'll throw bricks, burn your name, tell you you're wrong, or angry, or dangerous. But truth doesn't whisper when it's ready, it rises. And the thing about lies, they need everyone to stay quiet. But truth just needs one person to stand up. Denise had done that. She wasn't a hero, she was a mother. And a mother, when she decides her child is worth fighting for, you better believe something's gonna burn. The justice system didn't fix itself, but it flinched. It bled. Because one woman lit a slow flame and kept feeding it, day by day, speech by speech, story by story. They say lies can circle the world before truth ties its shoes. Maybe so. But when truth gets there, it stands taller, and it don't back down. This is Mark Joie, and this is Injustice Browning. If this story moved you, share it. Let your people hear it. Comment below. I want to know what you see in this. Because one voice ain't enough, but it's how every storm begins.